Got it right. Right, I think that says live.
Yep. So should we make a start then?
Yeah, let me just close this down. Yeah, that's fine. We can start, inshallah.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone that's joining us on the iSyllabus YouTube channel. I'm your host, Aman Durrani. I'm a consultant psychiatrist based in Glasgow. And I've got the privilege to spend a bit of time with Sheikh Amer Jamil, who many of you will be familiar with. He's one of the co-founders of the iSyllabus course. And we're going to touch upon a subject that's really important, and sometimes we forget about the importance of going back and revisiting some of the surahs of the Quran, particularly the ones that we get familiar with. And we're going to focus on a course that Sheikh Amer's put together and hoping to deliver in the next few weeks. The course is a short course called The Beginning and the End, the explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha and the last 10 surahs. And it's a course over 4 weeks. It's on starting with Saturday, the 14th of January, 2023, and the following 4 weeks every Saturday. And the course is from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. It's an online course. And you can sign up via the iSyllabus website, www.isyllabus.org. And obviously on the social medias, you can get more information. The course itself, there's an early bird charge of £39, which ends this Saturday, the 7th. And you can save £10 off the overall price, which is £49, which is a real bargain. And having done some of these similar courses before, there's usually excellent notes and resources available, but also an opportunity to revisit the videos and the sessions for a period afterwards. So we're going to talk a little bit around the course and thinking about it. So welcome. So Sheikh Amer, firstly, how are you doing? I know you've got a very, very busy schedule. How's life at the moment?
Alhamdulillah, yeah, everything's good. How are yourself?
Yeah, good, alhamdulillah. Just busy, but probably, I don't know whether you get a chance to wind down over this festive period, or you're...
I think I was like everyone else, had that cold or flu that was going around.
Oh, yeah, I think lots of it going about, alhamdulillah, but
yeah,
good to hear how things are. So tell us a little bit about, how did this come about? Because I know, particularly over the last few years, you've been doing a number of short courses along with Sheikh Rizwan as part of iSyllabus, and they're very different topics and very relevant topics. But this course itself, what was the kind of the genesis and the origin of this course that you've decided to do?
yeah. So this is a course. I mean, it's, obviously you have different types of courses, isn't it? Some are more theoretical, some are more practical. And in terms of, we were thinking about what kind of topics that people have a need for and also are interested in. And, obviously prayer is something that we do every single day for, how many years do we do it for, subhanAllah. So it's a communication with God. And obviously most of us are even if you know Arabic, but most of us are not Arabs, and sometimes we can feel maybe a little bit disconnected from what we're reading. And I think it's easy to go into a kind of rote routine where you kind of even reciting and not even thinking about what you're reciting, a bit like driving a car. And I think that because it's such a fundamental part of our lives and we want to try and get the most out of it, that if we could understand some of what we're reading, that would help us focus in the prayer and also obviously with connecting with God. And out of the entire Quran, for the vast majority of people, they're going to learn as children or even as adults the last kind of few surahs of the Quran. Small, they're short, but these are the ones that people tend to know across the board. Obviously, Surah Fatiha is fundamental because it's probably the first surah that we're all taught as children. and we're going to recite it, how many times throughout our lives. I was just doing a quick calculation just in our prayers. If you just did it for 50 years, so from the age of puberty, 50 years, you're going to end up reciting it more than 500,000 times just in the prayer. And if you take into account all the times you recite it outside of the prayer over that period of time, you're probably close to 1 million, or anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million times. This is something that you really recite almost 1 million times in your lifetime. So you want to make sure that what you're reciting, you have a decent understanding of it. And although there are, you can probably Google these things, but I think what happens sometimes when we do tafsir, and I know you've done Surah Yasin, we did Surah Yasin in the advanced course, and you probably remember, we went quite technical. So we got into some of the language wise, this word used like this word or at this particular place. And so that's fine in a kind of, you're doing over a longer period of time, and it's in a class setting with a few students. But what I wanted with this course was to make it practical. So I don't want to get into all the language, Arabic, complicated kind of stuff. You can, if you open a book of tafsir, some of them, they go into a lot of details, which it's fine from a linguistic perspective, but it doesn't really help the reader as such. So I want to stick to, well, if I was reading Surah Fatiha, so if I was reading Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, what do immediately what is capturing me? What am I saying? So I want to keep it quite non-technical. You can go on and on with these things, but you want to make it just kind of practical and just give it to people, the main things that are going on.
Yeah, but sorry to interject, but just on that point then, so who's this course aimed at in terms of what level, and who would be the kind of the ideal student? Is it somebody that needs to have some prior knowledge of Arabic or tafsir or the complexities, or is it somebody that if this is the first time? So what's the kind of what level you're pitching?
Yeah, so it's really designed for every type of Muslim, because everyone needs to pray. We all need to pray, and we all need to understand what we're praying. So it's not like a technical course that might be taught in a specific setting. I think it's more a general kind of tafsir, general commentary, and you're covering the kind of main ideas, like what's the difference between Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, because they both come from the same stem, which is mercy. So what is the actual difference between the two? Why does God mention both of them? So that kind of stuff, which is important, but you don't have to have Arabic language to understand it. That inshallah will be kind of explained. So the focus is that the Fatiha, because that's obviously our first surah. It's the greatest surah of the Quran. Sometimes it's seen as a summary of the Quran. And then focusing on the last 10 surahs, but I want to concentrate more on the last 3, because these are the ones that really everybody knows. The Surah Falaq, Surah Nas, Surah Ikhlas, the 3 Quls, as you say. People read them when they go to sleep. We're taught as children. If you're in prayer and you can't think of what surah to read, the surah by default is going to be Surah Ikhlas. So this is again another surah that you're reading over and over again. We'll hear this in the mosque. In fact, I just heard it the other day. It was somebody had passed away, and the Imam was saying that the Surah Ikhlas is like a third of the Quran. So what does that mean? Like, it's a third of the Quran. What's so significant about it that it's got that status? So the subject matter of it. So those last 3 surahs that we tend to read a lot, because we're taught to read them as protection. We do them over our children. We don't read them over ourselves. So that warrants a bit more time. And then I want to touch on the next 7. So basically the last 10, which are the main ones that we kind of memorize and repeat in the prayer.
Yeah. And so and I'd like to maybe ask you a little bit around some of these, but just taking a step back a wee bit. Even just this topic of the kind of the ordering of these surahs.
Yeah.
Now we know that there's a difference between kind of the revelation order and the kind of the compilation, isn't it? And I always found it fascinating that, you know, we're so used to it. I think when you're growing up as Muslims, you know, you get the Quran, you read Surah 1, and then you jump to the end and you read it backwards.
Yeah.
And that I always find that fascinating, you know, and that, you know, you start from the back, front and back. And so can you shed some light on kind of how the Quran is structured or ordered, and where that kind of came from, and the difference between the revelation? And is there any wisdom in these shorter ones being at the back? And you know, I guess the other thing is about probably Makkan surahs, and the difference between the Makkan and Madani surahs. So just as the way the Quran is all put together, before we come on to the individual surahs.
Yeah.
Really helpful to get your reflections on that.
Yeah, so as we know, the Quran's revealed over 23 years. It's, you know, and this is one of the miracles, isn't it, of the Quran, that it's something that if you're writing a book and you write it in 1 year, there's a flow to it. But if you try and write it over 23 years and keep the same flow, keep the same style, it's a lot harder. The way that the Quran is structured now and the way it was revealed are separate, because when revelation's happening, obviously it's got to come in certain stages. So as you said, you have the Meccan revelation during the first kind of period, and then when the Prophet goes to Medina, then you have the Madani period where the surahs are revealed. And there's a difference in terms of the subject matter. In Makkah, it's about belief, it's about oneness of God, it's about the next life, stories of the prophets, so forth. In the Medina, the legislative stuff starts happening, zakat, in terms Hajj comes in, you've got the hijab, the prohibition of alcohol, the ahkam, the rules, the legal rulings are being explained, because that's a different stage. So the Quran is obviously, when it was revealed, it was following that pattern because of the events that were happening, and it was reflecting that what was supposed to happen. But you know, so the prohibition of alcohol comes later. But obviously, once it's established, isn't it? So nobody drinks alcohol. We know it's prohibited. So although that was natural at that time, it had to come there. But once the religion is established, you don't need that chronology. You can put it all together. So what happens is, at the end of the Prophet Sallallahu life, after the Quran's been revealed, then Jibril is sent back and he's instructed that put this particular surah here, put this particular surah there. And so we end up with the format we have now, with Surah Baqarah, then Ali Imran, then Nisa, because Baqarah is from the Medina period. And as you rightly said, the last juz, 30th juz, is more or less from the Makkah period. There are some Madani surahs, but it's more or less from the Makkah period, and they tend to be the very short ones right at the end. And you know, Surah Baqarah is obviously a surah, but it's extremely long. So obviously there is wisdom in how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put it in that particular order. And the surahs are also connected. There's like a connection between surahs as well. So
and I also actually thinking in our current day and age, because I guess the beauty of the Quran at the time was that it was revealed in a response to what was happening in the Prophet's life, peace be upon him, and addressing the issues. And you know, even with the recent census, we heard that, I guess, particularly the UK, we're becoming more and more a godless society, where even you know, those aspects of, you know, atheism and agnosticism, etc., are more and more prevalent. And you can see actually the real merit of going back to some of these surahs, which are going back to the Makkan kind of basics of faith, of tawheed, of akhirah, of these kind of core fundamental, and obviously a lot of the legislation and inheritance rule and stuff is a bit, is later on, but you can actually see the real merit of us as a society going back to our roots, particularly, over the last few years. COVID has obviously shaken a lot of people. Our society has changed. People are looking for direction again, and trying to find their way. And I think perhaps it's a real opportune moment to revisit some of these core themes, that maybe come up in Makkah surahs, but particularly these ones. But I think I also find it interesting what you're saying is that although we read like things like Fatiha so many times, the danger of that is it just becomes quite robotic, and it quite automatic. And I know whenever been to, courses or lessons where people say about increasing the quality of your prayer, they say the first thing is about, understanding what you're saying. And I think even if we've done it in the past, we drift away and we forget. And, I think maybe it's a really timely reminder, but I think it's fascinating, just even the shorter surahs have so much depth to them, So how have you kind of approached, like, what sources, or how have you kind of prepared for this course, of these topics? Like how have you kind of put some of the content together?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been looking at some, obviously, the books that we've got from the tradition, and like I said, I'm staying away from all the kind of the really technical stuff, which you can get into, like, kind of very academic discussions. But at the end of it, okay, it's a very good academic discussion, but at the end of it, okay, well, how does that help me in my prayer? So I'm trying to stick to just what is the meaning, what is God actually saying to me, and how should I be kind of responding to that? What meaning should I take away? What kind of things should I be thinking about? So I'm going to try my best and keep it quite practical. So in my mind, as I'm preparing, I'm thinking, okay, I need to watch that I don't get too academic about this or scholarly. So I'm trying to just keep it as like kind of not simple, but straightforward, and I think accessible as possible. I want to make the surahs accessible, so that when we read them, we quickly kind of, okay, that's the concept. And obviously, Surah Fatiha, I'm going to spend a bit of time on that, because that's, it's the greatest surah of all the Quran. It's the first surah you open the Mus'haf, it's there. It requires a bit more time and effort, because we read it just so much more than any other surah. And so, inshallah, we'll start with the Fatiha, which is the opener. Then we'll go back to the end, and I want to spend a bit of time on the last three, which are also very significant, and then touch upon the other ones, the kind of main themes, and what's kind of happening, because these are ones that we'll more likely have memorized.
Okay. This is, it sounds really interesting, and it sounds like, as you said, it sounds like probably people that are attending, it's probably a more a spiritual exercise as well, in building our connection, between us and our Creator. That so it's not just an academic exercise, although I'm sure there'll be bits that we learn from the Arabic and where it comes from. But it sounds like by the end of it, it'll be, it's that spiritual element that you'll feel depth and your personal kind of progression. So I think
so the idea is to connect a bit better with those surahs, because these are ones that we're kind of reading all the time. So at least these ones which we're reading constantly all the time, let's inshallah try to get a grasp of what's going on. And I mean, and even as you know, Ramadan's just around the corner, although we're talking about New Year's, but I mean, Ramadan is less than, I think it's 10 weeks away. So 10 weeks.
Not long.
Yeah, 10 weeks away, and obviously it's a month of Quran. So it's a good thing. I think it's a good way to start the year, learn a bit about the Quran, and it gets us also, a bit more interested in the Quran, so that when, inshallah, when Ramadan comes, we can do a bit more reading on it.
Yeah. I was reading on the iSyllabus website, and there's the blurb around the course mentions a few quotes. I don't know if you got them handy or not, or you
can just read them out to me. I don't have them handy.
Yeah. So there's three which I found really interesting. So one was obviously a quote from the Quran, Surah 16. And we have sent down the book to you as an explanation for everything, a guidance, a mercy, and glad tidings for Muslims. And the hadith from Bukhari, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, I leave behind me two things, the Quran and the Sunnah, and if you follow them, you will never go astray.
Hmm.
I just wonder about, I guess sometimes, we delve so much into the fiqh or the nitty-gritty of other things that sometimes we lose sight of these. I know certainly I'm guilty of that sometimes. You're thinking a lot more, of contemporary issues and this and that, and sometimes you lose fact of some of the basics and stuff. So I guess this is emphasizing to us that we need to constantly go back to
Yeah.
the primary sources, isn't it?
The thing is, the Quran, I mean, if you just look at Surah Baqarah, which is the beginning, obviously, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. So it's described as a guidance. So it's a book of guidance. And so if God is saying this is a book of guidance and a person is sincere and trying their best, then the book will guide them. And I think one of the interesting things, just even looking at the last 10 surahs that we'll be looking at, is that it actually touches upon parts of the seerah, and you find this with the Quran because it's obviously happening to the Prophet ﷺ through his life. It actually, you see the kind of almost conversation between God and his Prophet, and what's happening and what God's saying to the Prophet ﷺ, and what's God saying to the people around him. And obviously, although it's a message for them, it's a message for everybody. And so it's a book that we're supposed to really think about. It's a book of reflection. So, when we read these surahs, we want to reflect upon, well, what's the message behind this story? What is God telling me in this story? What is God telling me in this particular surah? Why is it? What is God communicating with me? So I think that sometimes we read the Quran sometimes for reward. So it's a good practice just to read it. We read it for the reward, but we kind of skim over sometimes what the actual story is, or we might know the story. Okay, I know the story of Adam and Iblis, right? And he didn't prostrate him, and then that's it. We kind of skim over it, but what we need to do is kind of stop and say, okay, well, what's actually happening? Why did Iblis do that? Why would you do that? What's actually going on? Why would he do that to Adam? And okay, so how does he react to God? How does Adam react to God? What is it that Iblis, what was the sin of Iblis? Although we say it was arrogance, right? But what's arrogance then? So what is it that he was feeling towards Adam? So I think just stopping and thinking a bit more about, okay, this story is significant because God has mentioned it. And if God's mentioned it, it's a story which is supposed to be understood throughout time. So every generation's got to look at the story and try to understand, what is the story all about. So the Adam and Iblis is a massive story, because that is the beginning of the story. This is where it all begins, and it tells us about human nature. It also tells us, for example, there's a hadith that shaitan, flows in the veins of Bani Adam and the human. So we have, the devil has an inlet into the human. Okay, so what is it? What is it that he's going to access? In fact, the last surah that we've got, which we all probably have memorized, talks about shaitan whispering into the chest of man. And now we have, words like intrusive thoughts, buzzwords, all this whole discussion in COVID about mental health and people not managing their thoughts. So, I mean, it's telling you there that, look, there's going to be external whisperings. So, okay, which one of those, what thoughts, which of those thoughts are mine? Which of those thoughts which are not mine, which are disturbing me, right? So how do I now deal with that disturbing thought? So, I think when we're reading the surahs, we need to kind of stop and say, well, isn't that significant that the last surah that God is mentioning in his book directly mentions the whisperings of shaitan. And it tells us that there are min al jinnati wan nas, the very last verse, they're from the jinn and from mankind. So the helpers, the army of shaitan is not just from jinn, which is, which is what he's from. He's made, or his species is from humans as well. So you have human beings like that are there to mess up your life. You see, so then what happens is, like, as you know, you're a psychiatrist, right? People will say, I couldn't believe he did that to me. I couldn't believe I didn't do anything, and this person just flipped on me, or my uncle did this to me, right? But there's almost like a certain naivety that everyone's good and everyone's always got your best interests at heart. But guess what? That's not true. Yeah. And if we're actually just reading the book, it will tell you, no, there are people from the jinn and from mankind who are like this. And then the surah before it, Surah Falaq, it talks about magic, sihr. It talks about hasad, envy. It talks about the evil eye. So again, on that topic, some people are in denial. No. There's no such. There's some people even say this. There's no such thing as magic, as sihr, or evil eye. Then you've got the opposite of those people who, everything that goes wrong in their life, it's magic or it's the evil eye. I had an email just come through to me. It was a marriage problem, and the woman at the beginning said, I think someone's done sihr because there's no love in the marriage. So some people then think, okay, is it me? Is it something external going on? What's happening here? So then that requires a bit of time as well. But the fact that the second last surah God mentions in the Quran is talking about this topic, what does that mean? That means this is a significant topic, and it does affect people. Okay, so how do we then deal with it? How do we remedy it? Then Surah Ikhlas, right, which is, I've already said, a third of the Quran. The whole surah is about is talking about God, what we should believe about God. Qul huwallahu ahad, he is one, right? Allahu samad, he's eternally sufficient. So the whole surah is very short, but it's completely about Tawheed. It's completely about Almighty God, which is the most important relationship we have, which is with God. So we need to understand God very well. And as you said, living in a world now which is very much attacking, the whole idea of religion and God himself. So we need to understand, well, what is God and what isn't God? And that surah then is telling us that. So I think it's about, okay, these surahs, it's not by accident. God could have put any surah there. Why has he put these ones there? Why put these particular ones here? What is it that I can learn then from the surah? What can I take from the surah?
And the idea of these particular ones, the 3 or 4 goals that you read for protection and stuff, where's that idea come from, or where's the source for that? Is there a difference of opinion on these sort of things in terms of reading these particularly at certain times of the day, or for protection?
So we have hadith that mention these specifically, and we also have the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So probably the most important practice is that he used to read these 3 surahs before going to bed. So directly before going to bed, he'd read them, blow into his hands, and rub his entire body. So this is something that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam practiced, and obviously then encouraged that practice for us. So that's where the significance.
Is that once or a certain number of times?
You do that 3 times. So it's to do that 3 times. So these are the kind of things which are, very important. These are daily practices that we should all be doing. So this is why it's important just for us to spend a bit of time just to contemplate on these surahs and really realize, like, okay, what's the significance, and how do I then make that part of my practical daily life as well?
And taking that to Surah Fatiha at the beginning, obviously you mentioned we do it in our prayer, but it also has other benefits and powers, and particularly I think if people are ill or unwell, or for healing as well. So,
Mhm.
are you able to shed some light on some of the other
Yeah,
benefits of Surah
yeah,
Fatiha?
so Surah Fatiha has actually got lots of different names it's been given. It's even actually been called the Surah of Dua, of supplication, because the entire Surah is actually a supplication. It's actually a dua. So many people actually read the Fatiha as a dua. And so, without going into obviously depth because we don't have the time, but there are many benefits of the Fatiha. So the first and foremost is that it's a dua to God. But there are, like you said, benefits in terms of shifa. So there's a hadith in Bukhari. I'll just cut it short. That basically what happens is a story where a Sahabi, a companion, reads the Fatiha on somebody who's ill, and the person then becomes cured, and then they go back and tell the Prophet, the Prophet approves of it, and from that hadith, then people, or it was passed on that this Fatiha is also, it has shifa qualities. So people will then read this on water and things like that, drink it. They'll just read the Fatiha themselves, and sometimes even for difficulties, if somebody's going through difficulties, they'll read Fatiha for them as a dua. So there are those kind of benefits, which again are practical benefits that we should employ, so that we don't just read the Fatiha in Salah. We can read it outside of Salah as well. And then even, for example, you've got a cold, take your Lemsip, take your paracetamol, take
You can't get them at the moment. They're all, the shelves are run out of all these cough and thingy medicines. But
yeah, whatever medicine, take it. I mean, do the follow the medical advice, but there's no harm in in reading a Fatiha as well, and just using that as a dua for curing as well.
And what I know generally, I mean, in the reading the Quran itself, what's the opinions around reading things for the blessings to go to people that have passed away? And I know particularly sometimes people have mentioned to me, you read Fatiha or read the three calls and with intention of that the
Yeah.
reward goes, and people are more likely to do it if it's a shorter surah. So what's the kind of opinion on that?
Yeah, so there's a difference of opinion. For the first point probably is that there is a difference of opinion. So both opinions are valid, and people are free to follow either or. One opinion says that you can make dua for the deceased and istighfar, but that's about it. You can't read Quran for them. The second opinion, and that's a minority of scholars that say that, but the majority say that you can do any good action like sadaqah, charity, reading Quran, for example, and then make the intention that whatever reward that conjures up, that reward is then sent to the deceased. So many people, because because Fatiha is universal. So even an illiterate person in a village maybe will know Fatiha, they'll know Surah Ikhlas. And because Surah Ikhlas, because of the hadith of it is 1/3, they'll tend to say, like, why don't you read it 3 times? So you don't have to, but the Fatiha and Ikhlas tend to get coupled together. And it means that even an illiterate person who doesn't maybe have much knowledge, but they can read Fatiha with intention that, it's for their parents or somebody that's passed away, and that's a kind of good action that they can send for the deceased. So again, it's a like I said, it's not just that you're going to be reading it in prayers. You'll read it when people pass away. Sometimes make an announcement and people just read Fatiha as a dua or whatever. So you will end up reading it in different contexts, not just prayer.
And so in the course itself, will you be giving these kind of tips and this advice around certain significance of some of the surahs and when you can read them or use them in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I'll be mentioning like the meanings, and also like when we use these. And obviously there's going to be a Q&A, so that will deliver it over 3 weeks. And then at the end of it, there'll be a live Q&A. So if people got questions like these, we can also answer those questions. And if it's they can't make it for whatever reason, they can watch the recording as well.
So just to recap, people that are just joining, so talking with Sheikh Amer Jamil about a forthcoming short course organized via iSyllabus, and you can find out details on the iSyllabus website, www.isyllabus.org. It is a 4-week course online every Saturday morning from 11 a.m. to 1:30, starting on the 14th of January, and then every Saturday after that. And week 4 is going to be a live question and answer. The cost is £49 for the full course, but if you book up before Saturday the 7th of January, you get the early bird price of £39, which is less than £10 per session, which is a bargain. And you can also go back and revisit this, and it will inshallah be very beneficial. And just tell me about Sheikh, the way you structure the course. So the 3 weeks will be of you going through these topics and the surahs, and you've decided week 4 you'll have a question and answer.
Yeah, so I'm planning to start with Surah Fatiha, and then I'm going to switch to, once I've done that, Surah Ikhlas and the last the 2 quls, the last 2 surahs. So I think that will actually take up probably about half of the course, because these are the ones that are really the most important. And then the other half will be covering the next 7 surahs, which many people kind of memorize. So that'll be the teaching element, and then the 4th week will just be a live kind of Q&A.
Interesting. I thought I'd better kind of recap. So I was looking at I've got this copy of the English Quran translated by Abdul Halim. I quite like this translation actually, and it's one it's quite an easy read. So even I was just reflecting when I was looking at the surah titles themselves, it's almost like, they're so intriguing and so varied. So you've got in English, for example, obviously what we're familiar with. So Surah 1 is the opening. I know there'll be different translations, but the last 10, so you've got the elephant, Quraysh, common kindnesses, abundance, the disbelievers, help, palm fiber, purity of faith, daybreak, and people. So this is obviously Abdul Halim's kind of translations, and people have got different. But even just those, as they're almost so fascinating in themselves, and when you revisit actually the elephant, what's the story there, or what's the story behind abundance, Surah Kawthar, etc. So I think sometimes I think it's just helpful to revisit this. Sometimes when we've heard it over the years, probably you forget actually some of the depth to it, and you think so yeah, no, it must be a pleasure for you to go through it again and have the opportunity to kind of revisit it, because obviously I think when you're preparing these sort of lectures and presentations, you probably first person that benefits is yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the big benefits of teaching something is that you yourself benefit the most, because you have to obviously prepare for it, and you're human beings, you need to be reminded yourself. So how many times have we read Fatiha in our lives? But by preparing for it, you're uncovering things which maybe you knew at one point and you've kind of overlooked, or sometimes it's things you didn't even dawn on you, and you think, well, I've been reading this for a long time, and this particular aspect didn't dawn on me. So it actually does improve, because even since I've been doing it and I've been praying, my Fatiha has been improved, because I'm just a bit more conscious of what I'm saying, and just reflecting upon what it is. And it's very short, like Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment. It's like something we just kind of quickly gloss over, but having just prepared it, and just pausing very, very subtly, even if you just for a few seconds, and reminding yourself, okay, Maliki Yawmiddin, it's the 3rd verse, that there's going to be a meeting with God. I'm going to meet God, just like I'm standing on the prayer mat now in front of him, and sometimes my mind might wander and I'm not concentrating, right? But there's going to be a day where it's going to be me and God. I'm going to be in God's courtroom, and my life's going to be in front of me, so just reminding yourself that, that is like a major event that's going to happen in your existence. It's like anything, any major kind of events in our life, we kind of think about them, don't we? This is going to happen. When you're young, it's like marriage is probably the big thing. And, when you get engaged and for the next 6 months, you're thinking about your marriage and, there's a lot of prep going on. There's a lot of discussion. Your whole kind of life is revolving around that one topic. And then you have a child and, same thing happens, your life's kind of revolving around this child and your whole family's talking about the child and it becomes the main topic in your life. And so, these kind of major points in your life, or if you're going through like surgery or something, one of my relatives just went for a bypass today, massive, point in your life, so these things stick in your mind. But then when you realize that your entire life, all the important things that happened or will happen in your life, the most important is still to come. The most significant thing is still to come, and it's going to be the ultimate meeting with God, like your creator. Like when you stand, just you and God, nobody else, like me and God, right? And that's it. There's going to be this intimate conversation that your entire life from beginning to end is there. Things which you didn't even realize, God's going to say, well, what about that? What about that? Things that maybe you have not even realized about yourself, God will show you. And and this is where they say that, like predestination, qadar, sometimes people have difficulty with grappling with it. Well, why did this event happen to me and why did that happen? But when you are standing there and God shows you those events and why they happened and the reason for them, you're going to think, oh, all makes sense now. Why did I behave like that? Because this is actually the way it should have been, because of that, this happened and that happened, and none of that would have happened if that hadn't happened. So everything will make sense. Our entire existence, all the difficult, people that have had really difficult lives and have struggled, everything's going to fall into place when you're with God. It will all make sense. So that's a very significant pivotal part of your existence, and it's the third verse of Surah Fatiha. It's there straight away, that this is going to happen, it's coming, so keep it in mind.
I was just thinking about even just before that, the beginning where it says in this translation, praise belongs to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. And actually, we know it's so important now, even in terms of mental health and well-being, about gratitude. And you actually get gratitude journals, or there's techniques about every day just being grateful for things around you, because often as human beings we'll focus on what we don't have and the negatives and the difficulties. And actually, if you can train your mind to look at shukr, be grateful, be thankful for your sight, heating, a roof over our heads, it totally changes your perspective. And again, this is kind of now in current psychology, etc. And here we're saying 1400 years ago, this idea right at the beginning is to start with praise, being gratitude. You're not even asking, you're just praising. And finally, it must be doing something for our well-being and our frame of reference to say, actually,
and it's like you said
itself,
yeah, and like you said, it's I mean, that's the second verse of Surah Fatiha. So straight away, and even before you say it, before you begin Surah Fatiha, say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, you're already saying it in the name of the Rahman and the Rahim. And we say this in the beginning of every single surah as well. So it's like, okay, why did God pick those two names and not, why is it not like Al-Qadir, right, the able, or the Qahar, the dominator, or whatever you want to translate it? You could have mentioned any of his names, but he picks these two names, which are from mercy. So it's almost like a reminder that, look, I'm merciful. I'm merciful, and no matter what you think of yourself, God is merciful. so that it doesn't matter how bad you think you are as a human, or I'm not deserving of God's mercy, or I'm so bad, and all these things, right? God's saying, look, don't think about that. I'm merciful. You just turn to me, you repent to me, you sort yourself out, you try and improve yourself as a person, and you'll find me as the merciful one. So again, there's a comfort there as well, that especially when you're going through a difficult period, that okay, this is difficult, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the merciful. There's mercy, which maybe I don't understand right now. I don't get it. But like I said, when you stand on the day of judgment, and it's between you and God, and your life is replayed to you, and you're shown, it will all make sense, and you'll realize, oh my God, God was so merciful to me.
And I'm just thinking also of the blessings of, for example, learning or discussing or learning about the Quran itself, in terms of maybe the blessings that come in the household, when you're focusing, spending that Saturday mornings, couple hours, and inshallah that maybe even just the angels descending, or it's just kind of those gatherings. And I guess is there that kind of unseen element of blessings and barakah and mercy that can come into a household when you learn about the Quran?
Yeah, there's hadith about no people gather in a house from the houses of God, but usually that's understood as a mosque, right? But anyway, it's a house. Reading the Quran and studying it, except that angels will descend, mercy will descend. So there's a lot of things that are going on when we're connected to the Book of God. If you think of novels and things like that, sometimes we read them, we get inspired. That's the words of a human being. These are the words of God, Almighty God. So there's a heaviness. There's spiritually loaded words. There's all sorts of things metaphysically that happen, which we are maybe not aware of. Which is why they say, even if you didn't understand it and just read it, there's still a lot of benefit in there. But obviously, to read it with understanding is much better. But there's a direct there's something that happens to the human being when we're engaged with the Book of God. And the thing is, we know that we've had direct communication with God before this world. So in the world where God created our spirits, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when what's called the covenant was taken, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? Qalu bala, yes, you are indeed. So that shows you that all of us have had this conversation with God. We've experienced God's speech in some capacity. So there is something deep within the human being that comes alive, or there's something inside of us which has had that experience. So we connect with God's knowledge about Him. We connect with God's book. Something deep inside of us is connecting. Where we might not be aware of it, but that's why some people will read the Quran and say, I feel better, even though they didn't understand anything. They just read it and they feel better. Some people, as you've seen this as well, non-Muslims, are just start crying listening to the Quran. They clearly don't understand it, but there's something about it. They say there's something about it. It just moved something inside me. I don't know what it is, but something's moving.
I'm fascinated to see what happens after the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. All the non-Muslims that have been, and you should do some study to see whether there's more conversion in the next few years. But anyway, without digressing to Messi and the World Cup, we've got a few minutes left, Sheikh. A few quick questions before I conclude.
Yep.
Put you on the spot a wee bit. What's your favorite surah? Do you have one?
My favorite surah? I've never really, to be honest, thought about it. I think most.
Do you have a special affiliation with one, or one that special?
I think like with most Muslims, it's probably the Fatiha and Ikhlas. I think those two you know, there's something unique about those particular surahs.
Do you have any favorite reciters of the Quran that you enjoy listening to?
Not really. I used to when I was younger. I think I used to like Abdullah Basfar quite a lot because I was learning tajweed at that time, and I found it, you know, his was the easiest to learn where your mistakes were.
Okay.
But you know, I think I just I just vary them. I just listen to different ones. They're all got their own thing.
And people that are so much younger will not know about the cassette tapes we used to get of Sudais and Shuraim, and that was all you had, right? Which is like
right. Yeah,
starting a cassette and then CDs, and now finally, you know, you get everything on your phones. So
right.
very blessed.
And then you don't know what to do with those cassettes now anymore.
Yeah, let me know if ISIL was doing a project. I've got a few boxes still.
Yes, I think we've got the boxes. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Arabic tafsir? One that you
A favorite Arabic tafsir. I mean, I think I quite like. There's a kind of summary of Ibn Kathir by Sabuni. I quite like that because he takes it all, the kind of just gives you the kind of summary of it. That's not bad. And I think in English, although there's a bit of controversy on some parts of it, I think the study Quran is actually quite decent.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a decent work. There is a few things which have been highlighted by people, which I think, you know, as long as you're aware of that, it's quite a decent place to start as well. So I think because obviously most of our listeners are in, you know, from an English background and want something quick, I think that's a decent place to start as well.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. So our time is unfortunately up. So I would just like to end before I give the details again on this quote, which again I found on the website, and it talks about, I guess, the importance of understanding the meaning and what we read. So there's a quote which says, the example of a people who recite the Quran and do not know its explanation is like a group of people who have a written message from their king that comes to them during the night, and they do not have a lamp. Therefore, they do not know what is in the message. The example of one who knows tafsir is like a person who comes to them with a lamp and reads to them what is in the message. So, you know, we've got half the thing. We have the prescription, we need to cash it in, we need the lamp to understand the blessings and unravel that. So inshallah, this course will hopefully, you know, help you on your journey of that, getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his book. So as a reminder, it's a short course over 4 weeks, being taught by Sheikh Amer Jamil, called The Beginning and the End, the explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha and the last 10 surahs. Details on the iSyllabus website, www.isyllabus.org. And the first session is starting on Saturday, the 14th of January. And it's every Saturday thereafter, 11 a.m. to 1:30. And week 4 is a live Q&A. So three sessions of lessons and 1 Q&A. And if you book up before the Saturday, you get a reduced early bird price of £39. And after that, the normal price will be £49, which is still a bargain. So please do consider joining in the course. If you sign up, you can also access the videos on demand afterwards as well. So it's an ongoing benefit, inshallah, for you and your families. So do please consider joining in the course, spread the word to yourselves and to your families. And I guess we all make dua, inshallah, that people benefit from the course, and make dua for Sheikh Amer and the rest of the iSyllabus team, inshallah, to continue doing the excellent good work that they're doing. Sheikh, I don't know if you've got any final words, if we're happy to finish there just now, inshallah. I know you've got another commitment afterwards.
Yeah, I've got another commitment now. No, inshallah, I think, you know, I look forward to teaching it, inshallah. It's been, so far, I've really enjoyed preparing it. And like you said, it's, you can't I mean, nothing better than trying to understand the book of God. So it's this benefit. Everywhere you look at it's benefit. So inshallah, if people can join us, it'll be fantastic. If they can't live, then they can just catch up, inshallah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and catching up. And we wish you all the best, inshallah, and keep all of us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.